If someone says, I love God, and hates his brother, he is a liar. For he who does not love his brother whom he has seen, how can he love God whom he has not seen? Now that strikes me, and that has struck me for a number of years as really a motivation for this ministry of gospel-based reconciliation. I know it does the same for Dr. Gordon Grace Relations, and he'll talk more about that. But you all are aware that a number of pastors who are well known have fallen lately. And I find it strange, not that I'm condoning anything that has gone on, that we are quick to dismiss men for immorality, but you let them stay in the pulpit and leadership if they don't love their brothers and sisters. Whereas this text says, if you say you love God, but you don't love your brother and sister, you're a liar. And we know, those of us know, and we should know if you don't know, that the church has historically helped in the perpetuation and the preparation of continuing this divide across ethnic lines and cultural lines. We have been guilty, so therefore I would like to deal with the subject tonight. Brothers and sisters, the church has a problem. The church has a problem. You've heard that old phrase, Houston. We have a problem. Because the rocket ship got off course. And I believe the church has been off course on this issue, which I believe is a gospel issue, for far too long. And I don't want to bombard you with too many scriptures, but I believe scripture is the only way that we're really going to get this. In Galatians chapter 2, you know the text well, hopefully, that Peter and Paul were hanging out with some people that weren't like them. And then the fundamentalists came along, the conservative folk that Peter had some ties to, and he allowed peer pressure to cause him to stop doing what he was doing that was a result of his understanding of the gospel, and separate himself from people who were not like him, because the people who were like him all of a sudden showed up. And he would have got away with it except for one thing. Paul was there enjoying some ham and ham hocks too. But Paul, unlike Peter, did not separate himself because of peer pressure, wanting to remain a part of his ethnic identity. He confronted him to his face and told him, you have not been straightforward. Now get this. You have not been straightforward about the truth of the gospel. You preach a gospel that says everyone is saved by grace through faith and by the blood of Jesus Christ, but then your behavior says something totally different. And the church, for far too long and too many years, has been guilty of that kind of heresy. We say God saves everybody, but he doesn't save everybody like he saves certain people based on your ethnic identification. Some of us are really, really, really saved. Some of us are just saved. And that is determined by your ethnic identification, that is determined by your cultural nuances, and nothing could be further from the truth. Either the gospel saves every sinner, or it saves no sinners. We all have the same problem. Therefore, we all need the same solution. And a gospel that saves does not separate, it joins us together. The greatest divide in the history of mankind has been between God and man. God sent his son, as we saw here in 1 John, to be a propitiation to solve that division. that separation. So the same principles that solve that division are the same gospel principles that solve the Jew-Gentile division. And if God has solved the God-man division and used the same principles to solve the Jew-Gentile division, then the black and white division is solved, the Asian-Hispanic division is solved, and the church is the only entity that should be able to reflect that truth and that reality. But for far too long, we have not, because we have become more like the culture than we have more like the Bible. And I'm here to tell you, based on the Word of God, it is an atrocious sin. It is a sin because it contradicts the gospel, as we've already seen in Galatians, as I've shared with you. It's a sin because it contradicts the very salvation work of Jesus Christ. But men, let me hit you with a right hook. If someone were to mess with your woman, I think you would have a problem. And last time I checked, my Bible says that the church is the bride of Christ. The sin is we've been messing with God's woman, with Christ's woman, and he is not pleased. But we've neglected this subject because of various reasons, and I would like to get into some of those reasons, how we got into this problem. All this is not in your notes, but you have a simple outline, but I'll share this with you. Let's identify the problem. A multi-ethnic church can be defined in several ways. I've also been asked, is a church in sin if it is not multi-ethnic? And the response to that, it depends. It depends. And here's what it depends on. A common definition has been traditionally used in my study, found in literature, is that multi-ethnic or multicultural congregation is a group of Christians in which no one people group accounts for 80% or more of the membership. But most of our churches, probably the last statistics I heard, 95% of our churches are mono-ethnic. In liberal churches, it's about 85%. And the reason it's 85% in liberal churches is because anything goes in liberal churches. They accept all kinds of stuff. So they tend to be more diverse ethnically, but also in genders and other things that would not fit the scriptures. But 95% of churches tend to be mono-ethnic, meaning they're 80% of one people group. Another popular definition for a multi-ethnic church, and this is one I really like, and it's one that we practice here, is offered by the late missiologist Paul Hibbert, who says a multi-ethnic church is a church in which there is an attitude and practice. Key words, attitude and practice, of accepting people of all ethnic, class, and national origins as equal and fully participating members and ministers in the fellowship of the church. Secondly, he says, the manifestation is attitude and practice by the involvement of people from different ethnic, social, and national communities as members in the church. This definition does not establish a percentage criteria, nor does it establish any particular model or format that must be characterized a multi-ethnic church. There is a range of possibilities, he says, where a church can honestly be considered multi-ethnic. For the purpose of my study and my project that I worked on, we define a multi-ethnic church or a multicultural church or a multiracial church as a church where membership reflects the diversity of its community. Does your church look like the community that you're planted in? And if you are witnessing to people in your community and God is saving people in your community, then your church ought to look like the people in your community. But we tend to only reach people who look like just us. Because it's not really justice for all, it's justice for just us. I've been to conferences and I've heard some strange things, and from people who are supposed to be saved, sanctified, and filled with the Holy Ghost that just really wrangles my soul at times. I was at a conference one time, and it was a meeting, and Dr. Ware, you were there. I don't know if you remember this. And the statement was made that people need to stop piggybacking off our civil rights movement and get a movement of their own, quote unquote. And unfortunately, that's the way a lot of people feel. What we as African Americans have done, we didn't like what was done to us by our European brothers, but we're doing the same thing to other people who come from other countries. Matter of fact, if you study black history of the church, you find that there was a point in time when those who had moved from the South and moved up north weren't very acceptable of other people who were coming from the South because they were very unsophisticated. And we done moved on up from Sanford and Son to the high rise in the sky. And you're not on our level, so therefore you can't come to our churches. And that was done with people who looked just like them. But you didn't like it when people who didn't look like you did that to you. So how are you in line with 1 John, loving your brothers and sisters, when you're doing to others what you don't want done unto you? Far from being a preview of heavenly reality, however, less than 6% of the church in the United States can be classified as multi-ethnic. That's where we get the 95, 94%. And some of that is because of demographics. We understand that. But a lot of it is because we're just not fulfilling the Great Commission, going and making disciples of all ethnic groups. We want certain styles, and we want certain music, and we want certain cultural preferences. And we tend to say to people, you can come to our church, and we're willing to assimilate you, meaning come in and do things the way we do it, dress like us, look like us, act like us, talk like us, quack like us, waddle like us. But we're not really willing to do the biblical strategy of not assimilation, but what is called accommodation. How can we develop churches that reflect you, that reflect me, that reflect us to the glory of God? And that is really the biblical model and the biblical goal. There are several reasons and ways that we've gotten to the point of what we are. The first is the impact of Darwinistic worldviews on ethnic issues. Secondly, there's the impact of cultural fears on ethnic issues. And thirdly, the impact of scriptural misinterpretation on ethnic issues. So I would like to spend a little time just dealing with each of those, and I can't give you the depth of the notes, but you'll get the point. While the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation was a major step in the fight against injustice and the path of racism in the United States, it did very little to impact the racial divide in local churches. We were emancipated by the government, still divided in our local churches. And it was not only just a ethnic issue, it was a cultural issue. It was a gender issue. It was an economic division. People who looked like you because they didn't have the same economic levels were not accepted in churches. And we can complain about what the Europeans did, the white man did, but we need to look in our own backyard still today. The church, even today, still remains separated and segregated in many ways. What is Darwinistic theory? The theory of Darwinism, evolution, claims that human beings change from molecules to man. And it is a theory. but as a religion to those who don't know better. Over millions and millions of years, with one of our immediate states being that of apes, this theory logically implies that certain races are more ape-like than they are human. And that started with Darwinism, but we all know that you can go back in the Bible and find those kind of philosophies and ideologies. And we know the root of all this is really what? Sin. Sin. But we tend to not blame sin, we tend to blame the symptoms. But if the issue is sin, there's only one solution to sin. If the issue is symptoms, then you can have a lot of solutions that don't work. And they have not been working for over 400 something years. And we are as divided as we've ever been. Now, it's just not as blatant. The analogy I like to use is that a riverbed, and you have a river that's flowing, and when you stir the water up, you find out the stuff that's been on the bottom of the river tends to float to the top. See, we all look like everything's okay right now until stuff happens in the culture, and what's on the riverbed of our hearts begins to flow to the top. And now we got all these riots, and we got all this defund the police, and we got all this and all that. But then after the river calms down and it floats back down to the bottom, we think we're okay. And we leave the subject because we don't have a sense of urgency, because it's not as blatant as it may have been in the 1600s or the 1800s or the 1950s and the 1960s. And we become very comfortable again. Racism did not originate with Darwinism, but it did fan the flames and feed the fire. The widely held view was that blacks evolved from the strong but less intelligent gorillas. The Orientals evolved from the orangutans. And the whites evolved from the most intelligent of all primates, the chimpanzees. We all evolved, but we didn't all evolve from the same source. Some of us evolved from the animals that were a little bit better. Across the world and during the course of history, these theories are used to train and teach racism, oppression, injustice, and genocide. Therefore, it is paramount for the church to develop discipleship material and training to transform and renew the mindset of its membership on the subject of race relations. Why? Even though Darwin evolution theory has been used to justify division and discord among the races, God's holy word condemns the mistreatment of human beings one to another. How can you say you love God, who you can't see, and not love your brother who you can see? You all know the Bible. John 13 says that they will know you are my disciples by your... But we keep calling people saved who don't love. We keep telling them they're all right and they got a free ticket to heaven. But they don't love like God loves. And we all know that the fruit of the Spirit is... So how is it that people who are filled with the Spirit are not loving like God loves when the Spirit produces the fruit of love? How is it that you're not loving when God demonstrated his love towards you in Romans chapter 5, verse 8, while you were still his enemies? How did God get along with his enemies and we can't get along with ours? These are questions that will keep you up at night if you take the time to think about it. But we need our churches to be trained. We have not done a lot of training on this subject in our churches. People are not comfortable with this subject in churches. There are people who are angry, who want to keep on being angry because of the injustices of the past. But what we need to do is we need to ask the question, excuse me, what sin has been committed against you that's greater than the sin that you committed against God? What sin has been committed against me that I have not committed against the holy God? And every time I go to God and I confess my sin and I repent, guess what I want? Forgiveness, grace, mercy. And I get it every time. Yet we get it every time, but we will not extend it. Have you ever heard people say, I don't know how they could think that way. I don't know how they can act that way. The same way you think that way and act that way. Sin. Why are we amazed? Why are we befuddled? Why are we... I would never do that. No, you've done worse before a holy God. But we love ourselves. We love ourselves, and we think our little self should never be hurt, done wrong. I can do wrong to you, but don't you do wrong. And when I do wrong to you, don't be holding no grudge. But when you are done wrong, you want to hold. Does that not sound hypocritical? And the problem is, we don't have enough Pauls calling Peter out on this stuff. We don't have enough pastors who are willing to stand behind the pulpit and not be moved and call people out. I was sharing with Dr. Ware today. People love to call Dr. Ware and I to come talk to their churches on this subject. I'm saying, when is Paul going to talk to Peter? You're there. You're there 52 Sundays a year. How come you ain't saying nothing about this? Why you got to call in the gunslingers and the hired hands? It's in the Bible. Preach it. Teach it. Live it. Love it. But peer pressure. This leads us to our second aspect, the impact of cultural fears on ethnic issues. The impact of false worldview cannot be underestimated. The greatest impact finds its route in fear. Fear is a big reason why this issue is not addressed. Either the leadership is scared of the people, or the people are scared of the leadership. There's a lot of fears that have driven this. If we get together, if we become diverse, your daughter who don't look like my son is going to be start looking at each other and they might want to get hooked up. I would rather my daughter marry an unsaved garbage man. I'm sorry, an unsaved doctor than a saved garbage man. As long as they look alike. Fear. Fear what people will say if there's intermarriage. And so a lot of times people go to the Bible and try to use the Bible to defend why there shouldn't be interracial marriages. Well, you can't have interracial marriages because there's only one race. They're supposed to intermarry. They don't have any other choices but other people who are part of the human race. And there's nothing in the Bible that says you can't have interethnic marriages. Can't find it anywhere. Matter of fact, you can find situations in the Bible, such as Moses and Jethro and his sister Miriam had a problem because he married a African woman. How'd that go? How'd that go? Didn't go well. But these are examples we skip in the Bible. And so we go and find scriptures and pull scriptures out of context to justify something the Bible doesn't even mean or say. Fear. People find themselves afraid that what they believe about a group may be true, or what they believe about a group is not true. I'm sorry to bust your bubble. All black folks don't like watermelon chicken. Sorry. There are some black folks who don't like watermelon and chicken. all white people are not white devils. See, there's some misconceptions we have because we haven't built any relationship to find out whether they're true or not. And so we go with hearsay rather than what Bible says and what God says. And if you would build some relationships, you might find out that some of those misconceptions are not even true. Or you might find out they are true. But either way, it's still the love of God that we're commanded to demonstrate in those situations. You know, God is not like us. But yet he wants to have fellowship with us. But people who are not like you, you don't want to have fellowship with because they're not like you. Aren't you glad, hallelujah, praise the Lord, God don't have that same mentality? Fear kills vision and prevents unity by causing walls, barriers, obstacles to be raised between young, old, black, white, Baptist, non-Baptist, leading the church and culture to focus on superficial issues. The funny thing is, fear doesn't discriminate and is not prejudice. Let me read that one more time. That was good. The funny thing is, fear doesn't discriminate and is not prejudice. But can I hit you with a zinger? Satan ain't prejudiced either. He is welcoming all comers to his kingdom. Now, how sinful do we have to be prejudiced and bigots and separatists, and Satan is not? That makes you worse than the devil. Now, how do you get worse than the devil? Because you've been bamboozled, hoodwinked, and took. The fear killer is the love of God. That kills all fear. And it is found in the gospel of God. It's about learning to embrace and celebrate the differences as God has created them in a way that accomplishes the mandate, mission, and ministry God has given to the church in this culture for his glory. The modern day church in America is no longer concerned about God's glory. It's concerned about what's in it for me. And if there's nothing in it for me, I don't want anything really to do with it. Our flesh and influences of non-biblical worldviews causes churches to believe that people who worship differently or may talk differently or may have a different level of melanin in their DNA are somehow unbiblical or lack sound doctrine. I was at a Christian Bible college and seminary and was doing some lectures on this very subject and had the opportunity to meet with some of the staff and professors, and it befuddled me. And somehow they think that the Reformation movement is where Christianity began. I said, there was Christianity before the Reformation. Well, we choose this kind of music, and we believe this kind of music is really biblical because it's what they did in the Reformation. And I'm saying, well, why does everything have to be European? There wasn't no black folks and Asian folks and Hispanic folks in the Reformation. You do know there was a Reformation going on in Africa at the same time as a Reformation with Martin Luther, but the only one y'all talk about is Martin Luther. You do know there's blacks in the Bible. You do know there's black theologians who were protecting the truth all around the world at the same time. Why does everything have to be done European before it's biblical? Crickets. Why does it have to be your style? Well, because the styles that are not related to the Reformation are too cultural. They're too. Who said? Who said? Have you not read the parable in Luke about the two men who were standing at the door and they were both praying, and the Pharisee was saying, "Thank God I'm not like that guy over there," and the one over there was beating his breast and says he's unworthy. And which one do you think went away justified? So you think because you have the right form and structure that makes you biblical. But you don't have the heart of that man that is broken and full of repentance. But because you have the right style and the right form and the right academia and all, well, what are we talking about here? What are we doing? Now, if that's the way people who are educating people for ministry think, Lord help us. And for far too long, that's the way it's been. We need to start by asking questions. And what people believe or perceive about a particular group actually true, or just a result of having been influenced by historical, environmental, or experimental influences rather than biblical truth? Heaven is going to be a shock for some people. If God don't have a 9 o'clock service, 10 o'clock service, 11 o'clock service, and a 12 o'clock service, and we all got to go to the same service? When I read Revelation, it says we sing a new song. Here's my question. When did we rehearse that song? Because I wasn't invited to the rehearsal. But somehow we all get together, all tongues, all tribes, all kindred, get around the throne, focus on the one who's, and we sing the same song. And can you tell me what style it's in? What's the beat? See, Pastor Clay asks crazy questions because people are crazy. What's the tempo? Is it rap? Is it gospel? Is it just an organ and no guitar and no drum? Well, what is it? When the angels sing, what beat do they sing in? We're divided over stuff that don't make a hill of beans a difference to God because it's about your heart. The man who repented, his heart was right. The man who thought he had everything right, his heart wasn't right. Whose worship do you think God accepted? This leads us to our final one. Our time is just about gone. I want to make sure our brother has ample time. The impact of scriptural misinterpretation. Now, this is where the church really, you are really in dangerous territory when you take God's word to justify sin. You manipulate, massage the text so that you can be culturally relevant and fit in with the culture, because Paul is too scared to confront Peter and the Judaizers. These factors encourage ethnic and cultural divisions. The misinterpretation and misapplication of Scripture by the church has contributed to the ethnic and cultural division among various people groups in America and around the world. Racism in the American church, whether as a result of Darwinism or human wisdom, continues when misinterpretation and misapplication of God's word is prevalent. These factors encourage ethnic and cultural division rather than biblical harmony and unity, while hindering illustrations of biblical solutions for ethnic and cultural division and discord. We had study Bibles that had in the notes the curse of Ham. When anybody who can read, Jethro Bodine on the Beverly Hillbillies could have got this. That one of the sons was cursed, it wasn't Ham. But in order to be in line with the culture at that time, they had to find Bible or misinterpret Bible so they wouldn't have to swim upstream, so they could swim along. And so all black people are cursed because Ham is the father of all Africans. Therefore, we're all cursed. Therefore, the other two sons should be ruling over the third son, because they're cursed. No, it was Canaan, one of his sons. He had some other sons. They weren't cursed. The one son was cursed. Not all of them were cursed. And the problem that many of our Caucasian brothers, European brothers, don't understand is that creates a big problem for us who try to minister in urban communities with all these cults running around talking about it's the white man's religion. Because you misinterpreted the Bible, misapplied the Bible, got a bunch of people mad, and now they're open to false teaching by the devil and his cohorts, and you make it tough for us to do ministry in the urban context. But we understand that the root of racial discord and division is the sinful heart. All the how-tos, all the programs, all the strategies mean nothing if we don't get to the sinful heart. The sinful heart of mankind in life in a fallen world, there is no earthly wisdom that can fix this problem. That's why nothing has worked in 400-something years. All these peace meetings, all these unity meetings, I don't even go to those. Because if we're not going to bring Jesus and the gospel to the table, we're wasting our time. But the sad testimony, brothers and sisters, we do the same thing. We leave Jesus out the conversation. We leave the gospel. See, the gospel is just for getting people saved. No, the gospel also transforms people. The church must model heavenly wisdom from above in order to heal the division and discord. The seed of the power of the truth of the gospel planted in the heart of sinful people is the only solution for producing a tree that bears the fruit of racial unity and diversity. It's not sameness. It's the multicolored bride of Christ. God is trying to save people from all people groups, always has intended that, and always will intend that. And we don't not supposed to wait till we get to heaven to see that. We're supposed to see it now in the local church. In the notes, I give some examples. We just don't have time to cover them. Slavery issues and how the Bible was used to manipulate slavery to be very submissive so that they would just submit to any old thing. Misuse of Scripture. Misuse of Scripture. These splits left the more fundamental evangelical groups. If you know your history, the groups divided, especially Southern Baptists, divided up over this issue of slavery. These splits left more fundamental evangelical groups, supporting race-based slavery, while many of the liberal groups were abolitionists. The liberal groups were more acceptable than the fundamental conservative people were. The Bible thumpers. The Pharisees. The church in America will continue to have a difficult time helping to provide answers to a divided nation outside the church when it is not modeling solutions to the same division and discord inside the church among its own diverse ethnic group, among culturally diverse groups. It is my belief that one of the reasons we need the Holy Spirit is to be able to show the unity that we can't produce in our flesh. The reason that we need the Holy Spirit is to help us produce the love, the peace, the joy, the unity and diversity, the acceptance of one another in spite of our differences that we cannot manifest in our flesh. And if the church doesn't do it, brothers and sisters, there is no option B. There is no option B. There is no audible that Patrick Mahomes can call in the church to get it done. Research shows that most churches are 10 times more segregated than their neighborhoods. In this community, schools are more diverse than many of the churches are. If you went to the elementary schools, and I've visited many of them, they're more diverse than many of the churches that I visit in this community. How is that? Durian Gray, the founding pastor of Transformation Church in Indian Land, South Carolina, comments on this. What if black and white Christians, as well as other minorities, were members of multi-church instead of segregated ones? If we worship side by side in the body of Christ, could we not address racism, oppression, and injustice together? Is there really a problem of bridging the ethnic divide in the churches? Research and study says there is. And the only solution to this problem is the church. So Houston, we have a problem. Kansas City, we have a problem. America, we have a problem. Church, we have a problem. Brothers and sisters, we have a problem. But the good news this evening, God's got a solution. Let's pray. Father, we just thank you so much for this time. So much more that we could say, but we don't have enough time. Bless what has gone out. Use it to your glory. Transform our minds and our hearts. Conform us to the image of Christ all the more. And we will give you all the praise and all the glory.